Hello, Dr. Ron Eglin, and I'm going to go over a small video to show you how to do some little manipulations with connection strings and how to get connection strings in and out of the web config and actually how that whole thing works. What I'm going to do is I started with here is I've got a form here that I've created called database connection, and all I'm going to do is right now I'm going to use a SQL data source and I'm going to drop one into this form. I'm going to switch over to design mode here because I want to actually do some, I'm going to use the wizard to do this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure this, and there's only one configuration thing that I want to do. I want to go ahead and create a new connection. So I'm going to, when you create a new connection, it brings up the add connection dialog, and you can choose in your new connection from different servers that you have access to. In this case, I'm going to use a server that's the SQL server running on my local machine here. Oops, there we go. And that is my SQL server. Now you might have SQL Express or something else running, but the way this works is there's the name of the machine and there's the name of the instance of SQL Server or SQL Express it's running. And normally this will actually say MS SQL or it might say SQL Server. I actually changed the names of the instances of SQL Server running because I may be running multiple instances and they may have different names. I've got this set up for Windows authentication, and I could connect to a specific database. In this case, I will connect to a specific database. I can change this later on, and you'll see that it's very easy to do. I'm going to connect to the trauma data, which is a database I have within there. And I can test the connection, okay, and then I'm done. Now, here is the connection string. This is the connection string that it actually has created. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to save this. I'm going to call it the trauma data connection string. Okay, and I'm going to continue forward. Now, here, I don't really need to do anything because I'm not actually going to do anything with this data source. So I could just say, take any table that I've got right there. Okay, I can test the query if I want to. In this case, it didn't. I'd go back and I'd actually look at that. I'm pulling from a table. Let's just do this. Let's go to procedures, which I don't know if I have any data in there, but I'm just going to stop. I'm done there. I've got this data source. Now, what reason I created this data source, and you can use data sources quite a bit, and a lot of times I'll have 4 or 5 data sources on a form, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to show where does that information go. So to do that, I'm going to go over to the Solution Explorer. I'm going to pull up the web.config file. And I'm going to close the toolbox and put it out of the way. But notice what this has done. In the configuration file here, it's created this thing called trauma data connection string. Well, if you remember, that's actually the name I gave to the connection string. And the actual string that describes how to get to the database from the program is here. Okay, well, that's really interesting and nice. It's good to know that it goes into the web.config. But here's a question that I get all the time is, how do I access this from somewhere else? Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and go back to my Solution Explorer here, and I'm going to create a class. I'm going to add new item, and I'm going to create a class called Database Helper. Okay, kind of an interesting name to have with it, but Database Helper. Okay, add. Now, this is going to create this nice class structure, which is within my new website and has the class definition database helper here. Within the class itself, I haven't created any properties, but the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show how to get that back, how to actually read the web config and pull the connection string back as a string from here. So I'm going to create this public string, and I'll call this connection string. Okay, and it's actually going to be a method here. So I'm going to open. And what I'm saying here is that this is going to be public and it's going to be a string. I'm not going to pass it any parameters, so I'm going to make the that closed here. This should tell me that it doesn't return a value. Well, I don't return a value yet. So how do I get that string? Well, I'm going to use a couple of objects that are built in. So I'm going to type system.configuration dot, and this is actually the configuration within the configuration. Okay, so I'm going to create an object called a system configuration. This, by the way, is a namespace, and this is the object type itself as a configuration. And I'm going to call this root web. Okay, and I need to set it equal to something. So root web is going to be the name of the configuration object. And you've got some objects that you can work with to do this. So let's do this. Let's go to system. Okay, I'm going to type the full path of these things. Web. Okay, this is where this class lives. Configuration. And the object I'm going to make is a web configuration manager. I'm going to work with the web configuration manager, the web configuration manager. And now I have to call a method of that. This is a class method. The web configuration manager is a class. A class method, okay, or sometimes also called a static method, is a method that you do not have to instantiate the class to call. So I'm going to go ahead and open the web configuration, and I'm going to open it for my website, which is, by the way, my new website. I'm going to make sure I spell it right here because I'm actually reading it from here. And by the way, that's a string, so I need to make it a string. So this is my website. And it's going to open up the web config file for that. So I'm actually opening the web config file here. Okay, so what am I going to do with this? Well, I want to first create a connection string object that I can work with, or something that I can either do, pull it from the configuration settings. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a system dot configuration. I'm still working with the configuration namespace. And now I'm going to go connection strings. Now I actually do have more than one connection string here. Let's see, but connection. Okay, I want connection string settings. There we go. And that's an object of connection string settings. And I'm going to make an instantiation of that called con.str. So con.str string. So I'm instantiating a connection string settings object called constr. Now, I need to check first how many connection strings do I have in the web config. Well, if I go back over to the web config, I notice that I've actually got two. I've got application settings and I got trauma data connection settings. So if I go back over here to my helper class here, but I still need to check this. So let's first then look at and see how many there are. Well, how do you look at that? Well, I've got this thing called the root web, which is an instantiation of the web configuration file as an object. So if root web dot, now in there I've got all the different things that can actually be in a connection in a web.config. So I've got connection strings. So inside of the connection strings, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky because I have another method that returns the actual connection strings from the connection strings. Okay, and it looks a little tricky, but that's just the way that the object itself was constructed. And I want to just see how many I've got, and what I'm really going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is not going to be 0. Okay, so I'm just counting how many connection strings are in the web config file. The root web object is an instantiation of a web configuration file as an object. Okay, so pretty much said, you know what? I'm pretty sure I got them all. So I'm going to take this constr that I've created. You know what? I think I made too many n's there. No, it is correct. constr. I'm going to set that equal to, now I'm going to go back to my root web object, and what I want to do is I want to set that that const.str is a connection string settings class, and I'm actually going to set it to be the connection string settings for the specific connection string that I want to read here. Okay, I know it sounds really challenging here, but I'm going to put it all together. So root web. Okay, and I actually do want to show how the objects are work together. Okay, so now I've got my root web object, and it's got connection strings. And notice if I come over here, it says it tells you what this is. It's a system.configuration connection strings section, okay, of the web config. So there's my connection string section. I'm going to put that in there. And within the connection string sections, I'm actually going to bring back the connection strings. Now, I feel like I should actually explain here why you have that connection strings and that connection strings. Well, inside of the web config, it's got a section called connection strings. And inside that section called connection strings, it has some connection strings. So if you look here at this configuration connection strings, these are 2 connection strings within the connection string section. You can also put other things inside of here. So there are other things that you can do. Okay? So you would have to bring back those. You have to have the ability to bring back those from the connection string section also. Okay, but in this case, we're actually bringing this back. So now, nice thing about this is it has an access capability that it can actually do it through the name of the connection string. So in this case, the connection string is trauma data connection string. And so what I'll do is I'll just simply bring that over, and that will actually allow you to access that specific connection string. So go ahead and close that out. So now I've got a CONNSTR, okay, object, which is of type connection string settings, and all I want to do here, okay, is now I want to return that connection string. I want to actually return that as a string. So return, okay, well, we've got the con string set, CONNSTR, right? So it's got its properties, and one of the property of that connection string settings object that you want to return is the actual connection string itself. Okay, and it's a string. I can return it. Okay, now that works beautifully there. Make sure I got this right. Oops. This is CONNSTR. I want to make sure I've got, okay, I've actually set this. Use of unassigned local variable. Well, the local variable is set right here, so I'm going to continue forward. Okay, now inside the if, okay, I do need to go ahead and close this out because this is actually part of this if. Okay, so in other words, if it is greater than 0, it is going to return the connection string, and I still have a code path. If you look up here, it says I still have a code path that doesn't return a value. Well, that's because the if returns a value, but here I don't return anything. So I need to have some sort of default return that I'm going to put here. So what I'll do here is I'm going to return, in the case that it doesn't do this, I'm going to return string.empty, which is an empty string. So what this will do, if I call this class a database helper and connection string, okay, connection string itself from database helper will return this. Now, the nice thing about this is I can actually make this an instantiated class, or I can make it a static class. I'm going to make it static, meaning that I do not need to instantiate the database helper object to pull back this connection string. So last piece I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you how this all comes together. Well, over here in my database connection that I had right here, and I actually don't need the SQL data source, by the way. I never really did use it other than to show you how to create the connection string. I'm going to go ahead and put in a text box. Okay. Text box, text, whoops, I'm looking for the toolbox. Okay, I'm going to put in a text box. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that text box, okay, and I'm going to encode, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the connection string in there. I need to make it a little bit longer so you can see it. Okay, and I'm going to take the connection string that it reads from database helper and do that. I'm going to show you how to do this. So if I double click here on the page in the design mode, all right, double click in the design mode, it should take me to the CS file. It's not doing it, but that's okay because I have another way to do this. I'll go to Solution Explorer, go to my database connection page, I go to my CS file, in my page load, I'm going to say text box, okay, text box. Now it's text box 1, and I'm going to set the text equal to be database helper dot connection string. Okay, so I'm going to put that in there. Okay, I'm going to run it. I'm going to go ahead and bring this over. And look at that. There is my connection string that I have in my connection, in my web.config, right there in the text box. But what this also means is that you can use it pretty much anywhere you want to in your code. If you need to create a connection and you need to pull up those connection strings. So this is an example of how to access and display, in this case, a connection string that is in the web.config file. Thank you very much. This should be useful to other folks. Thanks.